Today, we're peeling back the layers of the most dominant operating system the world has ever known. We're going on a journey through the life and times of Microsoft Windows, from its clunky, ambitious birth to its polished, ever-evolving present. This isn't just a history of software. It's a story about us. It's about how we learned to talk to machines, and in turn, how they taught us to connect with the world. Imagine it's 1985. The world is moving to the rhythm of synthesizers, and in the world of computing, the dominant sound is the clatter of keyboards typing cryptic commands into a black screen. This was the era of MS-DOS, Microsoft's powerful but intimidating command line operating system. To use a computer, you had to speak its language, a language of directories, executables, and complex syntax. It was a world for programmers and hobbyists, not for the average person. But over in a small company called Apple, something revolutionary was happening. The Macintosh, with its friendly graphical user interface, icons, and a curious device called a mouse, was showing the world that computing could be intuitive, even fun. Microsoft, under the leadership of a young and fiercely competitive Bill Gates, knew they had to respond. Their answer was Windows 1.0. Announced in 1983 but not released until 2 years later, it wasn't an operating system in itself, but rather a graphical shell that ran on top of MS-DOS. The idea was simple but profound. Replace the need to type commands like read, C, runf program, exe with a simple point and click. It was Microsoft's first attempt to give the PC a friendly face. When it finally arrived, Windows 1.0 was underwhelming. It was a world of stark, tiled windows. You see, the term Windows was a bit of a misnomer because they couldn't overlap. Picture a tabletop where you can only place tiles next to each other, never on top. This was a significant limitation, born partly out of technical constraints, and partly, it's rumored, to avoid looking too much like Apple's Macintosh. It came bundled with a few now legendary applications. A simple word processor called Windows Write, the eternally charming MS Paint, a calculator, a calendar, and even a game, Reversi. For the first time, users could see a digital clock and play with fonts without needing a degree in computer science. It was a glimpse of the future. However, the reality was clunky. The system was prone to errors and crashes, earning it a reputation for being unstable. And then there was the mouse. Today, a computer without a mouse is almost unthinkable. But in 1985, it was a bizarre, alien peripheral. Most people didn't have one, and navigating Windows 1.0 with just a keyboard was a cumbersome, counterintuitive experience. It was a solution to a problem that many people didn't even know they had yet. It was a vision of a user-friendly future, built with the fragile tools of the present. Windows 1.0 wasn't a commercial success, but it was a declaration of intent. Microsoft had opened its first window, however small and murky the view, and the world of computing would never be the same. 2 years later, in 1987, Microsoft took its second major step with Windows 2.0. If Windows 1.0 was a hesitant proof of concept, 2.0 was a statement of growing confidence. The single most important change was something that seems utterly basic today: overlapping windows. This was a game changer. Suddenly, the digital desktop began to feel like a real one. You could have a document open and a calculator sitting on top of it, partially obscuring it, just as you would with papers on your desk. This simple design shift unlocked the true potential of multitasking on a PC. It transformed the computer from a single task machine into a dynamic workspace. You could be writing a report in one window while referencing data in another. This fundamental shift laid the groundwork for modern productivity as we know it. And with this new capability came new, powerful applications. This was the era that saw the birth of Microsoft's killer apps, Word and Excel. These weren't just simple programs. They were sophisticated tools that could run on the Windows platform, making PCs indispensable in the office. Businesses started to take notice. The combination of an increasingly usable interface and powerful software was turning the PC from a hobbyist's toy into a serious business machine. But this newfound success came with a shadow. Across the country, Apple was watching, and they weren't happy. They saw the overlapping windows, the icons, and the drop-down menus of Windows 2.0, and saw a copy of their own Macintosh interface. The result was one of the most famous lawsuits in tech history, with Apple suing Microsoft for copyright infringement, claiming they had stolen the look and feel of their operating system. The legal battle raged for years, a high-stakes corporate drama that could have crippled Microsoft. But in the end, the courts sided with Microsoft. A key part of the ruling was based on a licensing deal Microsoft had made with Apple years earlier. But the ultimate outcome was clear. The concept of overlapping windows was not something Apple could own. This victory was monumental. It secured Microsoft IS right to develop its graphical interface and solidified the overlapping window design as a core, defining feature of Windows for decades to come. Windows 2.0 may not be as fondly remembered as some of its successors, but it was a critical turning point. It was where Windows found its visual identity, armed itself with essential software, and survived a legal challenge that could have ended its story before it truly began. The 1990s dawned, and with them came the release that would finally make Windows a household name. Windows 3.0 was not just an update, it was a phenomenon. This was the moment Microsoft's vision finally clicked with the public on a massive scale. What made it so different? First, the visuals. Powered by the raw processing muscle of Intel's new 386 processor, Windows 3.0 delivered a vibrant, full-color experience. The drab, monochrome world of its predecessors was replaced with 16, and later 256 colors. Icons were redesigned to be more detailed and expressive. It was a feast for the eyes compared to the stark interfaces of the past, and it made computers feel less like industrial equipment and more like personal appliances. Performance was also dramatically improved. The new system architecture could access more memory, which meant Windows could finally run heavier, more demanding applications. This opened the door for professional creative software, like CorelDRAW and Aldus PageMaker, to flourish on the PC, challenging the Macintosh's dominance in graphic design. But the real magic of this era was in its user-friendliness. Windows 3.0 introduced Program Manager and File Manager, tools that made it incredibly simple to organize and launch applications and to find your files. No more navigating cryptic DOS directories. Now, you could just double-click an icon. Then, in 1992, Windows 3.1 arrived, and it brought with it a feature that seems almost laughably simple now, but was revolutionary at the time. Drag and drop. You could click on a file, drag it across the screen, and drop it into a folder or an application. It was intuitive, it was physical, and it made the digital world feel tangible. This was also the version that introduced TrueType fonts, allowing what you saw on the screen to be what you got on the printer for the first time. A huge leap for desktop publishing. Windows 3.1 was also famously bundled with two games that would go on to become legendary time wasters: Solitaire and Minesweeper. These weren't just for fun, they were clever training tools. Solitaire taught users the art of the drag and drop, while Minesweeper perfected their mouse precision and left and right clicking skills. With Windows 3.0 and 3.1, Microsoft sold over 10 million copies. The PC was no longer just for businesses or hardcore techies. It was entering homes, schools, and small offices across the world. For the first time, ordinary people felt empowered by their computers, not intimidated. The window was no longer just a small pane of glass. It was a wide, colorful gateway to the digital world, and millions of people were eagerly stepping through it. Few product launches in history have been met with the level of hype and anticipation that surrounded Windows 95. Microsoft reportedly spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a marketing blitz that was impossible to ignore. The Rolling Stones' "Start Me Up" became its theme song. The Empire State Building was lit up in Windows colors, and TV commercials blanketed the airwaves. This wasn't just a software update, it was a cultural event. And for once, the product largely lived up to the hype. Windows 95 was a fundamental reimagining of what a personal computer's operating system should be. It introduced 3 core elements that were so successful, they still define the Windows experience to this day. First, and most famously, was the Start menu. With a single click on the Start button in the corner of the screen, users had access to everything: their programs, documents, settings, and a way to shut down the computer. It was an elegant solution to the cluttered mess of Program Manager in Windows 3.1, providing a clean, organized, and discoverable hub for the entire system. Second was the taskbar. Situated at the bottom of the screen, it showed you which programs were currently running and allowed you to switch between them with a simple click. It made multitasking, which had been possible before, genuinely effortless and visible. The combination of the Start menu and the taskbar created a workflow that was so intuitive, it became second nature to hundreds of millions of people. Third, Windows 95 introduced the concept of plug and play. Before this, installing a new piece of hardware like a printer or a modem often required a frustrating process of configuring drivers, IRQ settings, and DMA channels. It was a technical nightmare for the average user. Plug and Play promised to make it all automatic. You plug in a device, and Windows would recognize it and set it up for you. While it didn't always work perfectly, leading to the nickname Plug and Pray. It was a monumental step toward making the PC a truly modular and expandable system for everyone. This was also the release that marked the beginning of the Internet age for the masses. Windows 95 included support for dial-up networking and, in later updates, bundled the very first version of Internet Explorer. Though the browser itself was primitive and unstable, its inclusion was a pivotal moment. It put the gateway to the burgeoning World Wide Web directly on the desktop of millions of computers, effectively kicking off the first great browser war with Netscape Navigator. Windows 95 wasn't just an operating system, it was a bridge. It successfully guided users from the old world of 16-bit architecture and MS-DOS commands to the modern 32-bit, graphical, and internet-connected era of computing. It defined the user experience for a generation and cemented Microsoft AS dominance in the PC market for the foreseeable future. What did you feel when you first saw that Start button appear? For many, it was the feeling of the future arriving, right on their desktop. Following the revolutionary splash of Windows 95, its successor, Windows 98, felt more like a careful refinement than another giant leap. The goal wasn't to reinvent the wheel, but to make the existing wheel run smoother, faster, and with better traction on the newly paved information superhighway. The biggest focus of Windows 98 was embracing the Internet. Internet Explorer, which had been an add-on for its predecessor, was now deeply integrated into the operating system. The Windows desktop itself could display web content, and folders could be viewed like web pages. This active desktop and feature was Microsoft's vision of a future where the line between your local files and the online world would blur into nothing. While the idea was forward-thinking, in practice, it was often slow and resource-heavy, and many users found it more confusing than helpful. Where Windows 98 truly shone was in its hardware support. The plug-and-pray promise of Windows 95 became much more of a reality. Full, robust support for USB, Universal Serial Bus, was a cornerstone of this release. For the first time, connecting devices like scanners, cameras, and keyboards became as simple as plugging in a cable, without needing to restart the computer. It was a small change that had a massive impact on usability, making the PC a more versatile and friendly hub for a growing ecosystem of digital gadgets. Windows 98 also introduced native support for dual monitor setups, a feature that power users and professionals immediately fell in love with. The ability to spread your work across 2 screens was a huge boost for productivity and multitasking, and it's a standard feature that many of us can't imagine living without today. However, for all its improvements, Windows 98 is often remembered for something else entirely: its infamous instability. Built on the same aging DOS-based foundation as Windows 95, it was notoriously prone to bugs, freezes, and the dreaded blue screen of death, BSOD. This reputation was cemented in the public consciousness during a live televised demo at the Comdex trade show in 1998. On stage, as Bill Gates himself was touting the system's reliability and plug-and-play capabilities, his assistant plugged in a scanner. The result? The system crashed, throwing up a blue screen of death for the entire world to see. The audience's nervous laughter and Gates's sheepish quip, "That must be why we're not shipping Windows 98 yet," became an iconic moment of tech industry humility. Despite this public embarrassment and its underlying stability issues, Windows 98 was a commercial success. It took the groundbreaking formula of Windows 95 and made it more powerful, more internet-savvy, and more connected to the physical world of devices. It was the workhorse operating system for the late 90s, but the cracks in its foundation were beginning to show, and a major architectural shift was desperately needed. As the world celebrated the new millennium, Microsoft released an operating system that would go down in history for all the wrong reasons: Windows Millennium Edition, or Windows ME. Intended to be a consumer-focused bridge between the old Windows 9X architecture and the next-generation NT-based systems, it ended up being a bridge to nowhere. On paper, Windows ME had some genuinely good ideas. It was designed with the home user in mind, focusing on multimedia and ease of use. It introduced Windows Movie Maker, a simple video editing tool that gave ordinary people their first taste of digital movie creation. It also featured an updated version of Windows Media Player and streamlined photo management. Its most significant new feature, however, was System Restore. This was a brilliant concept: the ability to take a make snapshot of your system is critical files and settings, allowing you to roll the computer back to a previous working state if a new software installation or driver update caused problems. It was designed to be a safety net for users who were increasingly installing a wide variety of third-party software and hardware.
The problem was, in practice, it rarely worked as advertised. System Restore was buggy, and sometimes the restoration process itself would fail, leaving the system in an even worse state. More often than not, the feature that was supposed to save you from instability became just another source of it. And instability was the defining characteristic of Windows ME. In an attempt to improve boot times and appear more modern, Microsoft removed the ability to easily boot into the underlying MS-DOS. This change, meant to sever ties with the past, had the unintended consequence of causing massive compatibility issues with older programs and drivers that many people still relied on. The result was an operating system that was spectacularly unreliable. It crashed frequently, froze without warning, and was plagued by mysterious errors. Users were not kind. It quickly earned the nickname the Mistake Edition, and its reputation for being one of Microsoft's biggest blunders persists to this day. It was a classic case of a product rushed to market, caught between two different technological eras. It tried to layer new, ambitious features on top of a creaking, outdated foundation, and the whole structure came crumbling down. For many users, the best thing about Windows ME was that it made them appreciate what came next even more. It served as a powerful, albeit painful, lesson for both Microsoft and its customers. You can't build the future on a broken foundation. It was a misstep, but one that made the arrival of its successor feel like a true salvation. After the disaster of Windows ME, Microsoft needed a monumental win. And in October 2001, they delivered it. Windows XP wasn't just an operating system, it was a cultural touchstone. Its green hills and blissfully blue sky became the most viewed photograph in history, the default wallpaper for a generation of computer users. XP stood for experience, and it was an experience that was, for the most part, incredibly good. The biggest change was under the hood. For the first time, Microsoft merged its consumer and business operating systems onto a single, stable platform, the Windows NT new technology kernel. This was the rock-solid foundation that had powered their professional systems like Windows 2000, and bringing it to the consumer market was a masterstroke. The result was a dramatic leap in stability and reliability. The frequent crashes and blue screens of death that had plagued the Windows 9X family were largely a thing of the past. But XP wasn't just stable, it was beautiful. It introduced a completely redesigned graphical user interface called Lunar. With its vibrant blue and green colors, rounded corners, and subtle animations, it felt modern, friendly, and optimistic. The Start menu was redesigned into a two-column layout that provided quick access to frequently used programs, and the taskbar could now group similar windows together, decluttering the screen for heavy multitaskers. Windows XP was also packed with features that catered to the burgeoning digital lifestyle of the early 2000s. It had built-in support for burning CDs, a huge deal at a time when sharing music and photos was becoming mainstream. Its new Windows Picture and Fax Viewer made it easy to view and organize digital photos, and improved plug-and-play support made connecting digital cameras and MP3 players a breeze. The system also booted up significantly faster than its predecessors, a quality-of-life improvement that everyone could appreciate. The combination of stability, a friendly interface, and powerful features made Windows XP an absolute blockbuster success. It became the essential operating system for homes, schools, and offices around the globe. Its life cycle was extraordinarily long. Microsoft continued to support it for nearly 13 years, an eternity in the tech world. Even years after its successors were released, millions of users refused to give it up, clinging to its familiar and reliable environment. Windows XP wasn't just software, it was a dependable digital companion for a huge portion of the planet. It was the window through which millions of people first experienced high-speed internet, digital photography, and social media. It became the gold standard for operating systems, a beloved icon whose influence is still felt today. What are your fondest memories of the XP era? That iconic startup sound, perhaps? After the unprecedented success of Windows XP, the world waited with bated breath for its successor. The development process was long and troubled, and what finally emerged in 2007 was Windows Vista, perhaps the most polarizing and misunderstood release in Microsoft's history. Vista was an operating system of immense ambition, but its reach ultimately exceeded its grasp. Visually, Vista was a stunning leap forward. It introduced the Aero interface, a beautiful design language characterized by translucent, glass-like window borders, subtle animations, and a 3D text switching feature called Flip 3D. It was designed to showcase the power of modern graphics hardware and, for a moment, it made every other operating system look dated. The Start menu was enhanced with an instant search bar, a fantastic innovation that let you find programs and files just by typing a few letters. Beneath the surface, Vista was packed with technological advances. It featured a completely rewritten audio, print, and display driver architecture, and it laid a huge emphasis on security. This focus on security was embodied by its most infamous feature, User Account Control, or UAC. UAC was designed to protect users from malicious software by requiring explicit permission before any program could make significant changes to the system. The intention was noble, the execution, however, was a nightmare. Users were bombarded with a constant stream of permission pop-ups, often for the most mundane tasks. The relentless "a program needs your permission to continue" dialog box became a running joke and a source of immense frustration. Instead of feeling secure, users felt nagged and patronized by their own computers. The other major problem was performance. The beautiful Aero interface and all the new background services came at a steep price. Vista was a resource hog, demanding far more powerful hardware than the average computer of the day possessed. Many PCs that ran Windows XP perfectly well struggled to even run Vista's basic interface, leading to a sluggish, frustrating experience. Driver support was also a mess at launch, with many older devices simply not working with the new system. Windows Vista became a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-engineering. It was visually ambitious but poorly optimized. It was technologically advanced but alienated users with its security measures. It tried to do too much, too soon, and it overshadowed the genuinely good ideas it contained. The public backlash was severe. and many businesses and individuals chose to stick with the tried and true Windows XP or even downgrade new machines that came with Vista pre-installed. Vista wasn't a failure of vision, but a failure of execution, and it left Microsoft with a serious black eye and a desperate need to win back the trust of its users. After the public relations fiasco of Windows Vista, the pressure on Microsoft was immense. They needed more than just a new operating system, they needed a comeback. And with Windows 7, released in 2009, they delivered one of the most successful redemptions in tech history. The philosophy behind Windows 7 was simple: take the good ideas from Vista, fix everything that was broken, and make the entire experience faster, lighter, and more intuitive. It was less of a revolution and more of a masterful refinement, and it was exactly what the world wanted. First, Microsoft addressed the performance issues. Windows 7 was designed to be lean and efficient. It booted faster, used fewer system resources, and felt snappier and more responsive on the exact same hardware that had struggled to run Vista. This alone was a huge victory and immediately won over skeptics. Next, they refined the user interface. They kept the beautiful arrow glass effects from Vista but toned them down and made them more tasteful. The real genius, however, was in the redesigned taskbar. Now called the Superbar, it combined program launchers and running windows into single, elegant icons. You could pin your favorite apps to it for quick access and hover over an icon to see a live thumbnail preview of the open window. It was a brilliant piece of design that cleaned up the desktop and made managing multiple applications a joy. Windows 7 also introduced new, intuitive ways to manage windows. The snap feature was a standout. You could drag a window to the side of the screen, and it would automatically snap to fill that half, making side-by-side comparisons effortless. Dragging a window to the top of the screen would maximize it. These small, thoughtful touches dramatically improved multitasking and workflow. And what about the dreaded user account control? Microsoft didn't remove it, but they tamed it. They introduced a slider with different notification levels, giving users control over how often they would be prompted for permission. The default setting was far less intrusive, striking a much better balance between security and convenience. Windows 7 was met with near-universal acclaim from critics and consumers alike. It was hailed as everything Vista should have been. It was stable, fast, beautiful, and packed with user-friendly features. It restored faith in the Windows brand and quickly became one of the best-selling and most loved operating systems of all time. It proved that sometimes the greatest innovation isn't about adding more features, but about perfecting the ones you already have. Windows 7 was a masterclass in listening to your users, learning from your mistakes, and delivering a product that simply works. As the 2010s began, a new threat loomed on Microsoft's horizon: the mobile revolution. Apple's iPhone and iPad were changing the way people thought about computing, shifting the focus to touchscreens, app stores, and simple, tile-based interfaces. Microsoft, fearing that the traditional desktop PC was becoming irrelevant, made a bold, audacious, and ultimately disastrous gamble with Windows 8. Released in 2012, Windows 8 was a radical departure from everything that had come before. It was essentially two operating systems fused into one. On one side, you had the familiar, classic desktop, a refined version of the Windows 7 interface. But the moment you pressed the Start button, you were thrown into a completely different world: the Metro interface, a full-screen, touch-focused landscape of colorful, live tiles. The iconic Start menu was gone. In its place was the Start screen, which was designed for tablets and touch input. The idea was to create a single, unified operating system that could run on everything from traditional desktops and laptops to the new wave of touchscreen devices. Microsoft was betting the future of the company on this one-size-fits-all approach. For desktop users, the vast majority of Microsoft's customer base, the experience was jarring and confusing. Using a mouse and keyboard to navigate an interface designed for fingers felt clumsy and inefficient. Simple tasks like shutting down the computer were hidden behind obscure menus. The removal of the Start button A comforting anchor for users for nearly 2 decades, felt like a betrayal. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Users felt lost and disoriented, as if the rug had been pulled out from under them. Microsoft heard the criticism loud and clear. Just a year later, they released Windows 8.1, a free update that was essentially a massive apology. It brought back the Start button to the taskbar, though it still opened the Start screen, not a menu, and allowed users to boot directly to the classic desktop, bypassing the tile interface entirely. It was a necessary course correction, but the damage was done. Windows 8 stands as a powerful lesson in the importance of knowing your audience. In their rush to embrace the future of mobile, Microsoft alienated their loyal base of desktop users. It was an experimental and innovative attempt to unify different platforms, but it failed to recognize that a desktop PC and a tablet are used in fundamentally different ways. It was a bold swing and a spectacular miss, and it sent Microsoft scrambling back to the drawing board to figure out how to win back the hearts and minds of its users. After the divisive experiment of Windows 8, Microsoft needed to unify its users and its platforms once again. Their solution, arriving in 2015, was Windows 10. In a clever marketing move, they skipped the number 9 entirely, signaling that this was such a significant leap forward that it deserved a new number. Marketed as the last version of Windows, it was designed to be a service that would be continuously updated rather than replaced every few years. Windows 10 was, in many ways, the perfect synthesis of the best of its predecessors. It took the stability and familiarity of Windows 7 and blended it with the modern, touch-friendly elements of Windows 8. The most celebrated change was the return of the Start menu. But it wasn't just a copy of the old one, it was a hybrid. The left side featured the classic list of programs, while the right side was a customizable space for the live tiles introduced in Windows 8. It was a brilliant compromise that satisfied both traditional desktop users and those with touchscreen devices. Productivity and multitasking were also key focuses. Windows 10 introduced Task View and virtual desktops, powerful features that allowed users to create multiple, separate desktop spaces to organize their work. For example, you could have one desktop for your work projects and another for your personal apps, and switch between them seamlessly. It also brought in the Action Center, a unified hub for notifications and quick settings inspired by mobile operating systems. But the Windows as a Service model came with a significant downside: forced updates. Microsoft took control away from the user, automatically downloading and installing updates, often at inconvenient times. While this was intended to keep systems secure and up to date, the implementation was often clumsy. Users complained of unexpected restarts that would interrupt their work, and occasionally, a buggy update would cause more problems than it solved. This policy of forced updates, along with concerns about data collection and privacy, became the most significant point of frustration for Windows 10 users. Despite these issues, Windows 10 was a resounding success. It was offered as a free upgrade for Windows 7 and 8 users, which led to rapid adoption. It was a versatile, powerful, and familiar operating system that managed to heal the wounds of the Windows 8 era. By successfully blending the old and the new, it became one of the most widely used operating systems in history, proving that the future doesn't always have to mean leaving the past completely behind. For 6 years, it seemed that Microsoft would stick to its promise that Windows 10 was the last version, but in 2021, a successor was announced, Windows 11. If Windows 10 was about blending the best of the past, Windows 11 was about refining that blend into a more polished, modern, and aesthetically pleasing package. The most immediately noticeable change was the visual redesign. Windows 11 introduced a softer, more rounded look, with a centered Start menu and taskbar design choice that felt heavily inspired by mobile and web interfaces. It was a clean, minimalist aesthetic designed to feel calming and focused. Multitasking was given another upgrade with the introduction of snap layouts and snap groups. Hovering over the Maximize button now revealed a set of predefined layouts, allowing users to quickly and easily arrange multiple windows on their screen. This was a more powerful and intuitive evolution of the Snap feature from Windows 7, catering to users with large, high-resolution monitors. The File Explorer was also finally updated with a tabbed interface, a long-requested feature that allowed users to manage multiple folders within a single window. However, beyond the visual polish and multitasking improvements, Windows 11 offered few truly groundbreaking features. For many users, it felt more like a Windows 10.5, a beautiful new coat of paint on a familiar engine. The stricter hardware requirements, which demanded newer CPUs and a security feature called TPM 2.0, also meant that many older but still perfectly capable PCs were unable to upgrade, which slowed its adoption. By 2024, years after its release, Windows 10 remained the more popular and widely used version. This revealed an interesting truth about what many users value most: familiarity and stability over novelty. While Windows 11 was undeniably more attractive, it didn't offer a compelling enough reason for the majority of users to go through the hassle of upgrading. It was a refined and pleasant experience, but it wasn't a revolution. It proved that in the mature world of desktop operating systems, sometimes new isn't enough. You also have to be demonstrably better in the ways that matter most to your users' daily lives. So, what can we learn from this incredible 4-decade journey? The story of Windows is more than just a history of software. It's a powerful lesson in resilience. It shows us that success is not a straight line. There are triumphs like Windows 95 and XP, and there are embarrassing stumbles like Me and Vista. The key is the ability to listen, to learn from your mistakes, and to have the courage to redeem yourself, as Microsoft did with Windows 7. This story also teaches us about the delicate balance between innovation and familiarity. Pushing the boundaries is essential, but as Windows 8 showed us, if you move too far, too fast without bringing your users along with you, you risk leaving them behind entirely. The most beloved versions, like XP and 7, were the ones that introduced meaningful improvements without disrupting the core workflow that people had come to rely on. And perhaps most importantly, this journey reminds us that technology is ultimately about people. The best features are the ones that make our lives simpler, more productive, and more connected. From the simple act of dragging and dropping a file to snapping two windows side by side, the legacy of Windows is written in the countless small moments of empowerment it has given to billions of people around the world. So the next time you click on that Start menu or minimize a window, take a moment to appreciate the decades of trial and error, of ambition and failure that went into making that simple action possible. What do you think? Which version of Windows holds the most nostalgic value for you? Was there a feature you absolutely loved or one that drove you crazy? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories and memories. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through time. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. Wishing you all the very best of health and happiness. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the technology that shapes our world.